Well, welcome everyone to episode 3 of the Real Profit, Real Perspective podcast. Papa, I'm a real business now. I'm Connor Malatesta, managing partner at Markoff and Malatesta CPAs, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Ryan Bannister, owner of One Up Advisors. Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm much better now that I heard you say that live. Was waiting for that.
Well, what we're actually going to do is we're going to cut this intro out in post. So actually, the only one that heard me say that is you.
It's me, and
That
will
that will
forever
not
be
be getting
me.
posted. I have talked to our designer on the back end, and that's why he said go ahead and do that, because nobody on the internet's ever going to hear.
Well, I'm excited, man. Last one was more in my current area, so this one we get to grill you a little bit and see behind the curtain a little bit of Markov and Malatesta CPAs.
Oh, there was nothing I love more than a good grilling, I say, as it's currently snowing here. Oh, yes. Going into what happens when you don't screw up your beginning and you actually pick up enough clients that you get to be a real small business. A real small business, as in someone who's got more than just themselves and one part-time contractor, like my wonderful co-host.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I know we kind of covered in episode 0 a little bit of where we are, but tell me more about where you are at currently.
So currently, as of the time we're recording, our firm is 12 or 13 people. I believe, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but we have 7 or 8 full-time professionals and 4 part-time bookkeepers. So we are about a dozen of us all together working on various projects, everything from accounting, bookkeeping to tax prep, stuff like that. We do basically run 2 separate dedicated teams. So we have a team of full-time professionals dedicated to tax prep and tax work, and we have the other team of professionals dedicated to bookkeeping, accounting, and business consulting, that kind of thing. And it's been really interesting to go from even just a couple years being in that solo entrepreneur seat to being responsible now for half a dozen people and 30, 40, 50 projects a month that we always have going on, because it's very much a little bit different than when I was the one doing everything.
Yeah, and you saying that too, honestly, man, I didn't realize it, I think, as it was happening, but looking back now, it seems like it happened pretty quickly, you going from solo to 12. Like that was quick.
Yeah, over the last 9 months, we have hired 5 or 6 people. So we really have doubled in size now which is really wild to think about. Not even including, when I say hired, I'm not even including our part-timers, but just in terms of full-time hiring, we have basically doubled in size over the course of about 9 months. Even more so when we pull in the part-time bookkeepers that we have working with us, which has, I tell you, there is nothing better to stress test your processes than hiring and just growing really quickly like that. It has an amazing way of, in much the same way as being a solo entrepreneur has the irritating way of pointing out all of your own character flaws, hiring and expanding and doing everything quickly like that has the really irritating way of pointing out every inefficient thing or subpar or screwed up thing that you do as you're sitting there going, why isn't work going forward? Oh, I didn't realize we needed to have a system to track this.
Yeah.
I didn't realize I needed to check in on this kind of thing. It really, it's a lot different. It really is.
Where do you think that stems from, or like what is the biggest difference, I guess, that I don't know, it's wording a weird question, I guess, but like where Where do you think is the most important part of that?
Oh, I think you're getting at the transition from when you're the one handling everything to why does it become so much different once you have other people doing things.
Yeah, you said it right.
Uh,
The words aren't coming out of my mouth well.
that's what I'm here for, buddy.
Yep.
Um, I think the big thing is that when you're kind of going back to what we talked about in the previous episode, when you're a solo entrepreneur, you're doing everything, which has the drawback of there's only so many things you can do at any one particular time. But it does have this kind of implicit benefit of you don't have to have robust tracking systems for things because you are doing everything. And so you end up subconsciously keeping your finger on the pulse of everything that you're doing because you're the one doing it. When you make the transition to a real business, going back to the title of this episode and the really dumb Pinocchio joke that I forced in there. Um, the thing is that that's when you truly move from, I believe, in a lot of management science, it's the transition from individual contributor to manager, because now a lot of your job is not doing the work. Your job is making sure that everyone else is doing the work, putting out fires as it happens, making sure that they have things to do, making sure that things are progressing according to deadlines, training the people below you so that they can develop themselves personally and professionally. It you move away from you being intimately involved with every single project that you're doing to how do I keep tabs on what half a dozen different people are doing when I'm not the one personally looking at every little bit of work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And it that's where the focus on process, going back to what you had said in the previous episode about that idea of what do you want for your business over the long run? Do I want to stay as a solo entrepreneur and I just want to be comfortable, or I want to grow to 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 people? And that little bit of foresight that I did not fucking have. um I will totally, I mean, the goal was always to grow and do this. Unfortunately, it wasn't until we grew and did this that I truly realized the importance of process, particularly once I had other people doing work. I don't need to explain to myself how to close out a set of books. I do need to explain to our bookkeepers how to close out the set of books and what they need to look for and what documentation is needed. I just know that stuff. That's why, as the usually when you are the boss, particularly when you're in a line of work such as professional services, you should be faster and more efficient than effectively everyone below you doing things, because you've gone through, you've done it, you've got more experience. You also don't have to ask questions of how are we going to do things. You just do stuff. That's why the running joke is always partners in accounting firms have the worst documentation, which I can admit I've gotten out of because I sit there and go, I don't need to document my work papers. I'm the one reviewing and doing it. I did it. I got better things to do.
Yep.
So that's a prime example of how laziness can start to kind of creep in a little bit of not documenting things as they should be. But that's it's an interesting transition, really, where the name of the game is less how do I do all the work and more how the hell do I keep tabs on everything going on right now. How in the hell do I know how work is progressing, what we're doing,
Mhm.
this, who's doing that? It's an information flow game that basically just gets worse the bigger you get.
Yeah, and I I think that is part of like what I've heard from a lot of my clients and growing and transitioning from like a solo business to when you have a payroll and people you're responsible for, and also in the process, like letting go of and changing a bit of the control you have on it. So, like, as far as that goes with the process, how has that change impacted you, would you say? Like, is that hard for you?
Um, the control thing is that's always an interesting one to really talk about. Um, because I've talked about that with clients that have also gone through and grown to that point, and it is really interesting how personality dependent that is. Um, I am. This is probably a terrible thing to say on a recording, but I am fundamentally a lazy person. I say after having worked to build a business over the last 5 years and lost any semblance of work life balance. But the idea here is that I don't have an issue delegating work because ultimately what I have to keep tabs on, what I care about is knowing what's going on. In a way, I I don't have an issue delegating. I have an extreme issue with not knowing what's going on. I think is where the control aspect for me kind of plays out is that it's not if I give this to you, you're going to screw it up. Right? I don't that part I don't have as much of an issue with personally. A lot of other people do. It's just different facets of personality that you don't really find out until you're the one delegating the work. But that's where
Hmm.
quality control systems are supposed to come into play for just reviewing to make sure that when things are set up correctly, if things get messed up, it should be caught. For me, the biggest thing is as we continue to grow, and due to the nature of picking up a lot of ongoing work, pretty much every month for us is worse than the previous, just because we have more work to do than the previous. And so for me, it's been designing systems and processes to keep to more this is where the laziness comes in, to efficiently keep track of what the hell is going on. And that whole process, a year ago I had no project management process whatsoever. I had my mother and my younger brother working for me on a part-time basis, and we were basically making do with Excel spreadsheets. And God bless them that they put up with that for as long as they did.
They love you.
Ah, yeah, it must have been because it was a mix of Excel spreadsheets and another system we were trying to use, and my God, it was horrible. They hated it. I hated it. We couldn't keep track of what was going on. It was a um it will be a great um, anecdote to go back to when we eventually have an episode on decision making. Because the downside for me is that I've never been in a position prior to this where I did a lot of management. So I have no prior management experience besides where we are at right now. Now, the benefit of that has been that I have no preconceived notions on what we have to do. So it's been I think the word's holistic, very holistic approach of just try some shit, see what happens, adjust, rinse
Hmm.
and repeat. Do that for about a year, which is really what a lot of this has turned into. And when over the previous summer, I picked up another part time bookkeeper. And I knew at that point, between the struggles we were having with the other work and bringing up somebody else because we needed more help getting the work done, um, I needed to have a system in place where this new person that I was bringing on could understand what their job was without us really having to go in and try and condense 3 years of experience into what they were doing. How do I basically follow the KISS principle of keep it simple, stupid, so that somebody who's got the requisite accounting knowledge, which is just relevant for us, but if whatever industry you're in that just has that requisite baseline experience, that they understand what their job is supposed to be,
Hmm.
which seems really stupid now that I say it out loud. But it really was that I did not have any sort of system for explaining we have this project. these are the tasks we have to do. Now you know what you're supposed to go do. Now go do these things. It was very much a, here's this client, go do it. Go, go do whatever. And so I spent an ungodly number of hours in the week and a half leading up to this part-time or starting point, basically getting an entire project management system in play, getting project proper documentation set up, which sounds really, really stupid to say considering we used to be auditors and documentation was everything that we dealt with. But when you go away from just proving that stuff happened into instead work aids, basically, AIDS, not the other one, which is what usually comes to mind when I think of the documentation we do for audits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it it really forced a new look at how do we do things. I remember, and I shared this anecdote with you. Probably about a year and a half ago, I was at a kind of a not a mock, but a real impromptu or informal business coaching group session. And one of the big things that was talked about was process. And I was asked at the time, when you have a client that comes in, how do you guys do your process to make sure that have your standard process for how to handle the work for the client? And I remember at the time saying, well, we every client is so different with what we've got to do. There is no way we could standardize what we do. Every client's in a different industry. Every client's got different numbers of accounts. They've got different ways that we have to record revenue or do these different things or do that or these different integrations. And there's no way to standardize all of that. And my God, was I wrong? I was so very wrong on that thought process of um, you know standardization and process and all that. Now we have templates that we use for everything, and the only thing that's allowed us to really grow like that, I know I'm talking about process a lot, but this really is kind of the crux of making that transition from solo entrepreneur to a proper business, is that it's the development of processes for the different areas of the business so that the people doing the work understand what they're supposed to be doing, and you have ways to keep track on what in the hell they are doing. For us, because we only have people currently that are on our payroll that do direct work, it's a lot of project management of the actual projects themselves and tracking progress on each client and being able to
Mm-hmm.
see what's going on. And this was I know this is a long-winded answer, but that really is the core of how we've grown, and what drives that change is that my job now every day is basically to come in, and with the exception of some a few of the projects we come in that I have to personally handle, it's to keep tabs on, is work progressing, what is everybody doing, to manage without micromanaging, but giving enough attention to the level of detail needed so that I know what they are doing and I feel comfortable. I start to get, that was your original question, was that kind of delegation and letting go. I get antsy when I don't think that I know what's going on with each project, or I start to go, I haven't heard about this one in a while. There should have been updates to this point, and then I have to go and check in. And that I think is how I have handled delegating a lot of that work without having kind of real issues with it, which I think is at the core of a lot of business owners when they do that, is the lack of control. And I've made up for that through being nosy and knowing what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up a really good point on the process part, because we did go really in depth, and I think that's pretty telling on what goes into, I think, the transition from a solo shop to having employees is you are adding different processes than you were used to before, where you previously are the one executing all the work. At this point, you've got too much work that you can't do it all yourself. So you have to step out of it and figure out a way, like you said, to keep an eye on it and know like that the work is still getting done, that you can
Yep.
um, do the first two steps, which is finding the work and getting paid for it, because step three, you are still doing the work.
Yep. I think if I had to boil down the one key thing, the one essence of when you stop becoming a solo entrepreneur and when you become a real business, besides fundamentally, you must have employees, because all this process stuff really doesn't matter as much when you are the one personally doing everything, having a standardized whatever. It's not really the same because you're the one doing all of that.
Yeah, it's like being efficient versus the work actually getting done at all.
Yeah, the transition is at its core a business, not a solo entrepreneur, but a business really is just a collection of processes. That's it. If you want to boil it down to its most technical terms, it is a collection of processes with the purpose of making profit. That is what a business is supposed to be doing. Not for profits are different. I don't. We're ignoring all that stuff. That's a totally different thing. In this context, I mean, a business and really any organization is just a collection of processes with the express purpose of accomplishing an objective. Most businesses, that's making money. Why do you have accounting? Why do you have sales? Why do you have marketing? Why do you have HR? Why do you have operations? Because those cover the different subset processes of what a business has to do. That's the whole point. They exist to standardize those particular areas so that the entity continues to exist. And as you, as the business owner, the CEO, your job is to build those processes and ensure they continue to run efficiently. That is what your job becomes. You're no longer, unless it's a true catastrophe, your job is not really about doing the work itself. Your job becomes ensuring that you have the resources available for the people that you've put in place to do the particular things you need them to do so that the organization can accomplish its main objective, which is usually make money.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It's the transition boils from you doing work to you not doing work. You better make sure you got people to handle the work, oversee, do all that. If you've
Yep.
got 5 people, I oversee a team of 6 right now. It's still the same thing. We may have different people handling different projects, but fundamentally, the whole goal is I have people that are currently doing the work, sending questions my way if they're not sure, sending requests to the client for stuff that we need, and then it goes to me, and me as the person in charge, I review to make sure it's all of quality, and then it goes off to the client.
Mm-hmm.
That is our core fundamental objective. Our tax team, we have a bunch of tax professionals. Their jobs are to do the tax work. Then those returns or whatever the other work papers are go up through review, get overseen, get issued out to ensure that we have quality. We get paid for doing both of those. Get, get the work, get paid, which by the time you've hit this point, you had better have a standardized process for getting paid, for doing your budgeting, for doing your not even budgeting, estimating for your new projects, and then ensuring at that point you should probably be pretty comfortable with making sure that you've got contracts in place and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
it all builds. This is the I think the part that scares a lot of solo entrepreneurs is that really, unless you are one of those startups that gets a bunch of VC money and you've hired a bunch of people and you're doing this development and shit like that, and you don't really know why you've got these people doing these different things, the way it really works is you just incrementally build on what you have existing. It's not so much a one day I'm a solo entrepreneur and next day I've got a team of a dozen people. It's you hire one, you're working with them, you figure some stuff out. I know you've already started to do that, which has already showed you needed new process and
Right.
changes to things, and it totally changed how you looked at the work. It also changed how you price the work because now you're not
Hmm.
personally doing everything. You've got people that are, cheaper than you doing it, so that you can be a little more price competitive. Then you have more people doing the work, and then you have somebody overseeing the work, and it's this kind of incremental building on top of one over the other, not so much a huge dramatic shift. And I think a lot of times in startups, for example, you'll see they'll go and they'll hire 30, 40, 50 people or whatever it is. They got all this money and they're trying to do all these things. Half of them blow up because they don't know why they're doing all of that. And
Yep.
when you kind of have that evolution, really, from solo entrepreneur to business, you've seen all those different areas, and you now get people to meet those needs that you now know need to be met and you can oversee. And I think this is also why a lot of times when we've seen clients, that this is why succession planning is so fucking hard. Because, to just speak bluntly about it, when you have the original owners of a business that grow it from nothing to where it's at, they know those lessons. They've seen the incremental build. Now, when you take away their institutional knowledge and put in new people, a lot of times they don't understand why things were set up in the place to begin with, because there were different assumptions or things for why those people are supposed to be doing that. And that's where you see these, second, third generation businesses get run into the ground. When you have this, it's like that prototypical, go on the internet, you'll read plenty of stories. The old man builds the business, the son takes over, son runs it into the ground, they go bankrupt, and they got to sell it off. They just don't understand all the other lessons that came from that initial evolution from the original solo entrepreneur to an actual business owner, which I do think is very important to ensuring that you have a long running and successful company, as the people in
Hmm.
charge understand what their role is. I've seen people in leadership positions that don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, which is just always concerning, really, is the ultimate word. When the person in charge, you're going, you're not meeting your kind of for your core requirement here.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Uh, I think that's a good move kind of into the next question I had in mind. And so, like, up to this point, we've talked about what makes a, a business a business and
Hmm.
what you've encountered in moving from solo to small team, couple people, to a team of over the whole firm, 12, 13 people, and still growing. So, with that in mind too, like where do you see things going from here for your business? And I guess what are your next what do you see as the most important part for sustaining and like growing your business where you're at?
So the word I'm going to say may sound a little familiar to you, because I believe last episode we talked about it being one of the most important things for a solo entrepreneur, and that's sales. Even at this point, it's still most important. It truly, at the core, sales is the most important thing for a business. Our longer term goal is to continue to grow and build the business. Our really part of it is me and Matt really wanting to see, can we build a um, significantly sized public accounting firm that doesn't have people encountering burnout, that the work life balance is sustainable, and we still make money. Unlike a lot of the other large firms that are dependent on the constant burn and churn of people, can we build a truly sustainable CPA firm? And a lot of that, with that idea in mind, comes down to what you said in the previous episode of making decisions, kind of thinking for the future, because this has been our goal from the beginning is to continue to grow and expand, which is
Mhm.
why we have, for example, everything set up that can be done virtually. We don't need people in an office. Everything is set up to allow for remote work because now we're not dependent on one geographical area. Most of my employees are scattered all over the country, which also gives us the benefit of every time I hire somebody new in a new area, it gives us an easy physical presence in that area to start building. Going back to what you talked about, a lot of those face to face relationships, we can hit states that normally we wouldn't be able to, which means that even us as a firm of 13 people can have almost national presence because we have people situated all over. Because when we were first setting up how we were going to do things, everything was set up for the I need it to be virtual. I don't need people to be in the office. I don't want to be tied to one geographical area. And it really, in terms of the scalability of continuing to grow, it really just continues getting better at project management and process. I mean, over literally the last week, I've been having discussions with my team on how we can set things up better to make more sense, have more clear deadlines. It's been one of those really interesting ones. I know that we were talking about off camera that we have actually set up some of our project tracking to be more detailed than it was a month ago.
Mhm.
And the overwhelming response was positive from everyone that's using the system of this actually makes life easier, which was honest. I wasn't expecting that, but it was a hey, these are the things I need to see. And as we started to do this and work together, which I think is the big thing getting into that, we could have a whole episode on team cohesion and leadership and stuff. I mean, we're
Oh,
we're
yeah.
so high level with this, but as we continue to grow and expand, it becomes important to make sure that everybody feels as if they are a part of that growth and expansion and has
Mhm.
input into the systems that they are at play in. I think all of us have been in situations where you're having to use systems and things where you don't understand why you're doing it. It's a pain in the ass. Somebody 7 titles above you says this is the new thing we're going to do because it's going to solve these problems, and you're sitting there going, "It's not a fucking problem. It's like we don't have that problem. It's these other things." Going back to I think 20 minutes ago when I was talking about that information flow, which usually just becomes symptomatic of, the person at the top doesn't know what's going on with the boots on the ground because
Yeah.
of various reasons. But for us, what's key to our long-term growth is, sustainable sales and then having processes so that we can easily and efficiently have everyone knowing what they're supposed to be doing. And then the ability to just not have to look for hires in one particular area. I can pick up from wherever. And the better our processes are, the easier it is to then fit them into what's going on. So if we suddenly get I can pick up somebody else. It takes them a week or two to get the hand, feet under them, get them running. There we go.
Yeah.
My latest hire, I think it's been a month and a half since we've hired him, and he's doing amazing. And we work together to figure out where's the weaknesses. One thing we have found, and I got to be careful here, or I will just talk for another hour, is that new hires are some of the best people to give you feedback on how your organization is doing things, because to them everything is new and they don't have a lot of that institutional knowledge or the thought of, well, we have to do it this way because it's what we've been doing. So every time I have new people doing things when we make changes, I try to get that input of, hey, here's what we're thinking of doing, does this seem like a good idea to you or not? And I want your honest opinion. I have told my team, if I've made a decision that is stupid, tell me that.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were saying about including them in the decision-making process
Yeah, and
and
it really,
feeling
because
part
it
of the team.
yeah, this, I know we haven't talked about this part at all, but ironically, this is probably the other part that is just as important, if not more so than the building of processes, is that congratulations, as you become a real business and you're a business owner, now most of your job is managing people. And that is a very, very different set of skills than doing the work. That's why
Right.
sometimes you have people that are really good at doing the work, but they don't make good managers, or you've got amazing managers that aren't really the greatest at doing the work. And as you move from that solopreneur to business owner, you've got to develop management skills through one form or another. For a lot of people, for the first time, it's usually by screwing it up. But at that point, hopefully you've been beaten down enough by being a solo entrepreneur that you're able to take that feedback of messing things up to just incrementally get better over time at how to run things. God knows my management skills continue to improve by the week, which isn't a like, I'm amazing, and every week I'm even more fucking amazing. It's more like, 2 years ago I had no idea what I was doing. A year ago I
Yep.
had only the faintest inkling of what I was doing, and now I kind of know what I'm doing.
I say it's like
And
we're starting from scratch here, and like now I'm decent.
it's amazing how much of this whole business owner journey and through everything is kind of hitting new levels and then starting over again.
Hmm.
Congratulations, you've been a solo entrepreneur, you figured out how to do all that, and now you've hired a bunch of people and you are back to square fucking one. And here's all the new things you've got to learn, and you're going to suck at all of them because you probably haven't done it. And then you get a little bit better. Now you've got 3 degrees of separation between you and the rest of your team, and you're not good at handling that. And so now you're back to square one. And it's just a lot of it really, that whole lifelong learning thing that everybody talks about, have a lifelong curiosity for learning, is irritatingly baked into everything we have to do.
Right.
And I mean, you don't have to. I think anyone that's been at a large enough organization has seen people that don't try to continue to improve. They just stagnate. And I'm pretty certain just about everyone would agree it's usually not the best working conditions, not the best quality of work, not the best life to have or it's because I'm dysfunctional deep down and just have a deep-seated need to constantly to seek something, which is probably part of it. I actually do not hold it against anyone that says I want to do this thing, be comfortable, and do anything else. I go, yep,
Mhm.
I don't blame you. That's why sometimes I'm working at midnight and you've had a really relaxed night. um, Sometimes I'm pretty certain I'm the crazy one.
Well, and I think one area that's come to mind too, and you kind of brought it up earlier, like as we're progressing through kind of the cycle of a small business, we've talked from starting out to sustaining, growing, managing teams. When you are working with clients, what are you looking at for exit strategies? Like, and maybe this comes from your actual perspective, because we all know that in accounting world, the big firms grow by acquisition, not
Yeah.
organically. But just in general, or specifically you, whatever's better for you, what do you think of exit strategies as far as, succession planning versus acquisition versus literally running it into the ground until you just can't work anymore?
Yeah, God, that's pretty certain that could be an episode on its
Yeah, that
own.
could.
And it's such a I really, I mean, fundamentally, your dichotomy pretty much turns into, does it either keep going or does it die out? And the big thing from an entity standpoint, if you look at the large corporations, right, give them credit for this, where credit's due, where they have hit the point where they continue to exist out of inertia and stuff like that, is that it really comes down to how key is the main decision maker to the continued existence of the business. Is much of what the business does predicated on what the CEO or the owner can do or knows how to do, or their connections? Or does the business, to a good extent, operate independently of the owner? Ironically, as much as at times it builds up a lot of resentment in businesses, sometimes the better running organizations are the ones where you go, the owner isn't even here doing anything. They're off playing or on their boat or on their jet ski. Because ironically, things have been set up in such a way where they are able to step out. And that makes succession planning, any sort of succession, easier, because then that person is not the make or break for whether the organization continues to exist.
Mhm.
Acquisition is what a lot of people hope for because to a certain extent it removes the onus of setting up self-sustaining processes from them to the buyer.
Right.
They want to buy out. Now they're going to step into that role and micromanage or do whatever is needed. And then the other owners get to basically check out, which I do think is part of why you hear about private equity gets in, buys out a business, it gets run into the ground because you run into that same problem of they actually didn't have a business set up well to exist on its own because too much information is lost in business valuations. That's basically why, to a certain extent, you have either a owner premium or an owner discount of if we're trying to sell a business and the owner is the only one who can really keep it going, do we really have a business that can be sold? Or do we have something where they have their own contracts, their own things going in place where they could step out and it's going to continue to exist?
Right.
And that's why when you're really thinking about the end of life of a business, that's where all this stuff kind of catches up to you on whether you've thought about it or not, is how much can I step away and things don't become a disaster? Or do we hand it off like a lot of smaller accounting firms do the acquisition, the buyout? You as the owner take your money and run, and fuck everyone else who's working at the business. Whatever, go find other jobs once things get run down. I've got my money. I don't really care.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, that to a certain extent, when the dollars are big enough, I can also see it. But I also think that to a certain extent, when you've got employees and if you've built a business, there's more of a connection there to those people than just the kick them to the curb because you got your buyout, which is what a lot of people do because it's easier. You get to walk away. It's not your problem to deal with. So,
Right. Yeah, and it brings to mind too the other side of it. We've talked about starting your business from nothing or like from your own resources. That's another way you could start a small business and sort of skip or avoid the solo phase is buying somebody's book of business or service or product.
they
Just
have a
add on.
whole, yeah, they have a whole entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Yeah, you can be
Um,
somebody's succession plan.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're familiar with the industry and all that, then more power to you. I don't know. I got mixed feelings on that, particularly for your first business, because
Yeah.
the problem being if you're buying a pre-existing entity and it doesn't have the appropriate people or processes in place, it's going to suck more resources from you than something that you start on your own. Yes, it comes with a pre-existing book of business. It also comes with more risk because it's going to have more capital requirements. And so, some people buy out business. I think restaurants are a great example of how often they will get bought out and they
Yeah.
continue to just bleed the new owner's money. And then it almost turns into a game of hot potato of, oh my God, this thing's bleeding money. We need to sell it to somebody else. Somebody else buys it, tries to turn it around, does it. They're bleeding money. They sell it to somebody else. And then you go, wow, this place has been through 4 owners in 5 years because it's like, yeah, it's just there's fundamental problems with the business itself. There's fundamental flaws in their business model. New ownership is not going to change that. It needs to die. Sometimes changing conditions just need to let something fall into the grave.
Yeah.
Which the whole, I think, change management, it could be a whole episode in and of itself, or the fact that don't get complacent when you're running your business. Just be, even over a 6 month period. I think I've read a lot of articles. If you're an actual business owner, there's a lot less emphasis on 5 and 10 year plans and more of a 6 month to a 1 year plan. I mean, to get a little topical with it, a year ago, nobody would have predicted that we would have had rounds of tariffs being put into
Mhm.
place. So if you've got 5 year plans based on those assumptions from a year ago, what do you then do at that point? There's a lot more emphasis on shorter term planning because it gives you more of an ability to respond to change, which again, succession plans, running the business in general. I mean, there's no way we can go to any sufficient level of detail on a lot of this. I'm just trying to throw out a lot of lessons learned over the course
Yeah.
of about 40 to 50 minutes here. But your problems become, in a way, you're no longer as worried about. I mean, fundamentally, once you become a business, you're less worried about you doing a lot of the individual work and more worried about how do you keep this thing going, which is its own separate set of stressors.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can handle that, then you can have a whole bunch more success. Some people have to fall back down and just do things themselves. We've got clients that say, I don't want a huge team. I don't want to deal with all that. I don't blame them.
Yep.
I, for whatever reason, I'm weird. I kind of like management. I like setting a process, figuring out how to do things. I've been finding that even though it's been a huge learning lesson, I am pretty good at it. At least that's what my team tells me. And I haven't threatened them in any recent amount of time. So I'm pretty certain they're being honest about that.
Like 0 days without an accident, 0 days with no threats.
Like, we already moved past the period where I had to tell everyone, look, the beatings will continue until morale improves. But yeah, it really, there's so much. I personally find it more fun in a way. But it also, there are parts where it's a lot more stressful, because now you have people's livelihoods and their families relying on your decisions, which I think is a great segue into, I think, what we've agreed our next episode should be on, which actually is decision making. Because as you go through this, basically the consequences of your decisions get steeper the more the business grows. It's no longer, I don't get paid. It's, I don't have money for payroll. If we screw up and run out of money, there's 12 people that don't get paychecks. There's 24 to 36 people that then in total would be impacted by our decisions, because it's not only our employees, but also our employees' families.
Mm-hmm.
And so just the stakes of the decisions that you're making get higher and higher. And it's how do you deal with all of that?
Yep. Yeah, I think we've quickly found that this episode 2 and 3 are very dense, and we covered really high level. So I think we have plenty of ideas for episodes in the future, and
Yeah,
anyone that
we definitely want
ideas.
to take more of less of a wide approach, which in hindsight, I think covering these two topics in about 40 minutes, we probably should have known, yeah, it's going to be about as deep as a puddle, a puddle in the Sahara Desert. But we want to, I think, set up our next episodes, our next discussion topics on things that we can go into more detail of this particular thing to try and give more actionable information on the mistakes we've made through these things, or what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, what we've seen our clients do well, and try and take more of a narrow but deep approach, as opposed to trying to cover, here's how to be a small business,
Right.
because that we can have an entire course on that. But the hope is that at least over these last couple episodes, it starts to get people's minds thinking about these things, to really take a step back and think about what they're doing, and to really start to think, oh, you know what, yeah, maybe I do struggle with making decisions sometimes, so I do want to go into this a little bit more. Or, yeah, I haven't thought about management in this way, or I haven't thought about the whole point of my business this way. And just to get people's minds just starting to kind of question how you're doing things, to make sure we're doing things well. God knows, I think we spend every week constantly questioning everything we're doing, not due to any deep-seated insecurities or anything like that.
But Connor, thanks for being honest and transparent, and as our name says, giving real perspective. I think both of these episodes were really good on
real perspective due to real fuck ups.
Yeah.
But with that, we will let everyone go and see you all next episode on how to make decisions.